My name is Claire Donovan, and I am 26 years old. And on the day my father left a voicemail telling me that since I had made my choice, he was no longer paying my tuition, I was sitting at my desk at work 3 hours into a Friday morning, and the voicemail meant nothing because there had been no tuition to pay for 6 months. I want to start with that detail because it is the center of everything. Not the wedding I missed, or the family group chat that exploded, or the silence that fell when I attached my graduation photo. The center is the 6 months. 6 months of working a job that paid more than my father earned at a position nobody in my family knew existed, inside a life nobody in my family was paying attention to, while a threat was being assembled and delivered about a lever that had already stopped working. I need to take you back further than 6 months to explain why nobody was paying attention. My sister Rachel was 3 years older than me, and the kind of older sibling whose existence created a gravitational field in the family. Not because she was exceptional, though she was confident and capable in her own way, but because my parents organized their attention around her with the specific, complete focus of people who have decided which child is the story and which child is the background. When Rachel wanted something, the family found a way. When she changed her major twice and extended her degree by 2 years, nobody counted the cost out loud. When she had an emergency, I was expected to help without being asked in advance and without being thanked in any formal way afterward. I had learned by the time I was in high school that asking for too much led to disappointment, so I had stopped asking. Not dramatically, as a practical adjustment. I studied instead. I worked part-time jobs starting at 16. I built towards something without discussing it with anyone, because discussing it with my family had historically produced one of two outcomes. Either it became a conversation about Rachel, or it produced a comparison that placed whatever I was doing in relation to whatever Rachel was doing, and the comparison never worked in my favor. So I kept quiet, and I kept building. What nobody in my family knew was that I had finished my degree 6 months earlier than scheduled. I had focused so completely on completion that I had front-loaded my coursework and graduated in the fall rather than the following spring. I had received a job offer from a technology company the same week I finished. The salary was the kind of number I had only ever modeled in optimistic spreadsheet exercises. I accepted the offer. I moved into my own apartment. I paid my own bills. I started doing the work. I did not call home to share any of this because sharing achievements with my family had always produced a reaction that was more management than celebration, and I was done being managed. The Thursday phone call came in the early afternoon. I almost let it go to voicemail. I recognized my father's number, and I knew from the timing and the context, Rachel's wedding was 3 weeks away, that something was coming. I had a legitimate work conflict that weekend, a client presentation that had been scheduled for months, the kind of professional commitment that could not be rescheduled without significant cost to the relationship I was building. I had planned to tell my family I could not attend. I had not planned on the response I received. My father's voice on the call was the voice he used when he had already made a decision and was communicating it rather than discussing it. He said my attendance was not optional. I explained I had a work commitment I could not cancel. There was a long silence. Then came the words, "If you do not show up for your sister's wedding, we are cutting off your tuition money." I sat at my desk, looking out my apartment window, and felt several things simultaneously. The first was the specific, surreal quality of receiving a threat about money that could no longer be taken from me. The second was the recognition that my father had delivered this threat with complete confidence, which meant he genuinely believed I still needed what he was threatening to withhold, which meant he had not been paying attention to my life for at least 6 months. I said, "I have to go." I ended the call. I did not explain myself. The following morning, my phone was flooded with messages. My mother first, then my aunt, then cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. The family had been informed that I was considering skipping the wedding, and they had formed a collective position on the subject without asking me what mine was. My aunt sent a message that said, "Rachel only gets married once." A cousin wrote that family comes before work. Another relative asked how I could be so selfish. I read them all. I did not respond. There was no point. Nobody was asking for my perspective. They had already decided what the story was and my role in it. Rachel reinforced it. She posted wedding countdown photos almost daily, each one with captions about family and loyalty and support. The timing felt deliberate. Maybe it was. Either way, the message was clear: show up or be blamed. As the pressure accumulated, I noticed old memories surfacing. The vacation I had missed one year because the budget had been redirected to cover one of Rachel's emergencies. The academic award ceremony my parents had skipped because Rachel had a conflict the same day. The countless moments where being responsible and self-sufficient had meant being invisible. I had accepted all of those things at the time. Now I was simply observing them. Meanwhile, at work, I was leading projects and meeting deadlines and earning trust from people who evaluated me on results rather than on which sibling I happened to be. A client had specifically requested me for an upcoming project. My manager had mentioned the word promotion in a casual way that I understood to be intentional. I kept working. I kept staying quiet. I did not argue with my family's messages. I did not defend myself. I simply went to work on the wedding morning. The wedding day was a Saturday. I was at my desk by 8. The morning passed without drama on my end. I had a presentation to prepare, and I prepared it. My father's voicemail arrived at 11:42. His voice was sharp in the specific way it got when he was disappointed and had decided that his disappointment was a consequence I deserved to experience. He said I had embarrassed the family. He said Rachel was devastated. Then came the part that I had been waiting for. "Since you have made your choice," he said, "we are no longer paying your tuition." The message ended. I sat with my phone in my hand for a moment. Then I put it down and went back to my presentation. The family group chat was moving fast by the time I checked it an hour later. Dozens of messages. Some relatives confused, some openly critical. Several people had decided, based on information they did not have, that I had chosen to be absent from something important out of selfishness or laziness, or some failure of character that they were qualified to diagnose from a distance. I read every message. Then I typed a response. Not an argument, not a defense, not an explanation of my work commitment or a description of how the tuition threat had landed, or a request for anyone to understand my position. I thanked my parents for supporting my education over the years. I said I wanted them to know something. I said that 6 months ago, I had graduated. My degree was finished. There was no tuition left to pay. Then I attached the photo from my graduation ceremony, then the employer announcement from the day I was hired. The group chat went completely silent. For the first time that day, the wedding was not the subject of conversation. The questions started slowly, and then all at once. Some relatives assumed I was joking. Others thought I meant I had graduated recently, as in within days. One cousin asked when exactly. Another asked what company. Someone asked what my role was. I answered politely and specifically. I described my position accurately. I did not inflate anything, and I did not diminish anything. I simply told the truth. Then one cousin looked up the company, then another. Then someone asked about compensation in the specific indirect way that people ask about compensation when they already suspect the answer and want to see whether you will confirm it without making them ask directly. I did not post numbers. I did not make comparisons. But I also did not deflect or qualify in the way I had spent my entire life deflecting and qualifying when it came to my own accomplishments. I answered what was asked. Within an hour, relatives who had been in possession of a story about me had connected enough dots to understand that the story was significantly wrong. I was not a struggling college student dependent on my parents. I had not been for 6 months. I had my own apartment. I paid my own bills. My income was higher than my father's. The reaction was not uniform. Some relatives who had sent critical messages became very quiet. Others reached out privately with what I interpreted as genuine curiosity rather than strategy. My aunt, who had told me Rachel only gets married once, sent me a private message that evening that did not contain an apology, but was written in a different register than her earlier message, more careful, less certain. Rachel was, by several accounts I received later, less than pleased that the group chat had stopped being about her wedding day. I understood that. It was her wedding day. It was also the day my family discovered that the daughter they had been treating as a supporting character in someone else's story had been building a lead role somewhere they had not been looking. My parents did not reach out that day. They reached out 3 weeks later, not to demand, not to order. They asked to meet. That was the first time in my memory that my parents had asked rather than told. We met at a small restaurant equidistant from our homes. The conversation began awkwardly, in the way that conversations begin when nobody's entirely sure who has permission to go first. My father broke the silence. He said, "We did not know." I said, "I know." And that was true. They genuinely had not known. Not because I had hidden my success particularly strategically, but because they had spent so many years directing their attention toward Rachel that they had stopped tracking what I was doing with any real specificity. I had become, in their internal accounting, the child who was fine, which in practical terms meant the child who required no attention. For the first time, I explained what that had felt like, not with anger, not with the performance of emotion designed to produce a specific reaction, just honestly. I talked about missed milestones and the specific invisibility of being capable in a family that interpreted capability as evidence that you did not need anything, rather than evidence that you had worked very hard for a long time without anyone noticing. My mother apologized. It was not a speech, it was a sentence, and it arrived with the quality of something that had been sitting in her for a while and had finally found its way out. It did not erase the past. I did not expect it to. What it was a beginning, and I had decided somewhere between the voicemail and the group chat response that a beginning was what I was willing to offer, if they were willing to receive it honestly, rather than as a transaction designed to restore comfort. We have been meeting monthly since then. The conversations are different from the conversations we had before October. They are built on accurate information now, rather than on the assumption that they knew who I was. They did not know who I was. They knew who I had been in relation to Rachel. I am not the same as that. The lesson in this story is not that you should hide your accomplishments from your family, or that proving people wrong is a goal worth building toward. The lesson is about where you put your energy. For years, I had been putting energy into managing a family's perception of me, adjusting my presentation, downplaying things, making myself smaller in the specific way that capable people make themselves smaller in environments that have decided capable means optional. I had been doing that instead of just building. Once I stopped trying to be seen and just built the thing eventually became visible without my having to present it. A voicemail about tuition, one message in a group chat, a graduation photo attached. That was all it took, not because I planned it as a reveal, because I had spent 6 months building something real, and when the moment came, I simply told the truth about it. My father thought money gave him control. He did not know that the mechanism of control had expired 6 months before he tried to use it. My parents thought they knew which daughter needed watching. They were watching the wrong one, and the one they were not watching had been very quietly, very consistently building something they are only now beginning to see clearly. That is the whole story. Drop your city in the comments, hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.